Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Suzanne Patterson, and I'm the Director of International Programs for the Institute of Public Administration of Canada, IPAC. IPAC is Canada's leading professional organization supporting excellence in the country's public sector. With 18 regional groups across the nation, our members include public servants, academics, and others interested in public administration. The Institute also works closely with all levels of government to promote quality public services and practices. IPAC is a recognized leader in research, training, knowledge sharing, and outreach, including hosting a large number of conferences and events held regionally and nationally. This is a continuation of the Alt Leadership Program, which was co-delivered by the Institute of Public Administration of Canada and the African Association for Public Administration and Management, and the Canadian Bureau of International Education. This interactive program provided emerging African leaders with the opportunity to learn, develop, and practice new leadership skills to apply to current and future organizations. The webinar today is presented by the Danish Design Center, or DDC. Using design as a method and mindset, the DDC has worked with thousands of companies and organizations to focus their innovation efforts by enabling them to do what designers do best: expand their perspectives and zoom in on the needs of humans, societies, and our planet. With design knowledge, problem-solving know-how, and hands-on tools, we empower organizations and the public service to innovate with greater impact. The DDC has been in business for more than 40 years, a period of major societal transitions. Over the years, we've seen how collaboration is key to eliminating the silos that get in the way of innovation. That's why they design strong partnerships where businesses and organizations work together across industries to drive green, digital, and social changes with long-lasting results. They are about building capacity and giving people the tools and methods to pursue and realize new opportunities for sustainable growth, to the benefit of organizations, society, and the planet. I'll just give you an overview as to the purpose of design thinking in the public sector. As problems and challenges in public sector becomes increasingly complex, new tools are needed in the toolbox of public servants and leaders. Design thinking offers a mindset, approach, and tools for dealing with the wicked problems often being at the core of these complex challenges. I'd like to now introduce Diane Bukaka, who will be joining after the presentation as the moderator of the following discussion. Diane Bukaka was born in Madison, Wisconsin, and lived in the Democratic Republic of the Congo for 12 years. She was brought back to the Congo to learn the culture and returned to the US for college. She moved to Toronto, Canada, 9 years ago. Diane worked as an administrative and event coordinator for an immigration association before joining IPAC 2 years ago. I hope you enjoy this presentation, and I hope you take away some tools to add to your toolkit that will help you resolve and think differently about public sector wicked challenges. Thank you.
Our main purpose is to make people capable of working with innovation, working with design, in order to create a more sustainable world. Not a world where we decrease in welfare and welfare and wealth, but also where we grow, both as humans, as communities, as societies, and as a global sort of global society as well. Yes. So let's get on with the first chapter, which is the purpose of design thinking in public sector. Okay. So you do know that as the world becomes more globalized and interconnected, I mean, there's the tendencies for complexity to increase. We've seen with the crisis or the problems around climate, how do we create a more sustainable world? Me as a Danish citizen, I'm spending 4 times the resources than the planet can take if everyone did the same as me. That's a big issue. We need to solve that. It's a global issue that has a great effect on my and everyone's life. Extremely complex. We've just been through a pandemic, probably still in the pandemic in most places, also here. Extremely complicated because it's on a global scale. You need to think everything connected while we're still solving things on the ground in each little country. And you might say that we are encountering more and more of these problems that are wicked. Wicked in the sense that they're uncontrollable. And it's obviously wicked problems in a global scale, like the pandemic or the climate crisis, but it might also be local issues of a way smaller scale that might be wicked. So we might ask, wicked problems, what is that? And it's a word that was coined back in the 70s, actually. And here are 10 properties of wickedness in problems. But the main idea about wicked problems is that they don't seem to have an end. It's a problem that when you start solving it, a new problem somewhere pops up. It's a problem that seems there's no really one right or wrong. There's not worse or best. It's everything seems connected in some way. So it's very much problems that we see in public sector, because public sector deals with not just the bottom line as private companies, but the welfare of citizens, of real human beings. That is their bottom line. And by definition, more or less, human beings are wicked. I mean, we're complex. We have feelings, we have behaviors that are unpredictable, and so on. So as public sector, when you try to solve something, usually something else pops up. It has a consequence somewhere else that you cannot predict. So wicked problems are really, really hard to predict. There's not much cause and effect, which puts, when dealing with these wicked problems, that puts massive pressure on public sector as a whole, but in particular decision makers in public sector, and the space where they can actually go and say, okay, we're taking this decision because we know it's the right decision. It's really, really hard, because usually in wicked problems, when you take a decision, you might realize that that decision was not the right decision quite soon after. So it needs different framework for decision making. And one way of looking at that framework of decision making is this one. You might know it, you might have seen it before. Sort of maps out 4 different kinds of problems that you can solve and that you find in any society or in any public sector office. You have the simple problems. We almost stopped talking about those because those are almost just like checking off a list. Those are those where we know exactly what is the cause and the effect of it. There's a cause and effect really, really evident. And we can use best practice in the sense that this problem is something that has been solved before, so we know what works and what doesn't work. So we just do it. We solve them quite quickly. No consequences whatsoever. Then we have complicated problems, which is similar to simple problems, but it's just like a bunch of simple problems stacked on top of each other. So it might be harder to figure out exactly what is the cause and effect, but you can find it through rigorous analysis, and then you can make a system that works it out. It might take longer time, and you might not have a one-to-one best practice on the matter, but you can find good practice, that someone has done something similar in different areas, and maybe you can combine that, and then you have a solution for it. Complicated problems are time-consuming, resource-consuming, because it takes a lot of brain and usually also analysis numbers to figure out what to do, but they're not hard. On the other side then, complex issues or problems are hard, because those are the ones where it's hard to see the cause and effect, because You can say there's a lot of things at play, and when you move somewhere, when you touch somewhere in a complex problem, something unpredictable happens. So it's like space of a lot of uncertainty just for wicked problems. And we see more and more of these problems in public sector. They've always been there probably, but as we get more connected to each other, information flows, the complicatedness of public sector in general and government is increasing. Complex problems emerge. You can, though, solve them, but you have to do systematic experiments, figure out what should we do here and then, and make experiments in small scale and scale it up if it works, and then do something else if it doesn't work. Which is very similar to the design thinking process that I will present to you in a minute. Then there are also the chaotic problems that you probably also encountered one or three times in your life. Pandemic, COVID-19, as at least for some days, months, weeks, it's been completely chaotic. And when you have chaotic problems, then you just need to find a solution here and now, something that can stabilize the situation so that the problem moves up to become a complex, complicated, or simple problem. There's no best practice here, there's no good practice, there's no systematic to it. It's just about getting it stabilized as fast as possible. Usually on brink of wars, it's chaotic. Those days where everything falls apart, completely unpredictable, is chaotic. And as public sector, you need to deal with those like ASAP to get to a place where you have more time, where you have more ability to think of processes to solve your problems. Recently, in March 2020, when DDC closed, not DDC, but Denmark closed down due to the COVID-19 pandemic, our Prime Minister went on a national TV at a press meeting, and she said this: "We cannot wait for evidence. We cannot wait until we are entirely sure what will work. We are going to make mistakes. I am going to make mistakes." She said that on national TV, stating that maybe first and last time coming out of the mouth of a politician, at least here, that she didn't know what to do. This was a chaotic situation, at best complex. So she would try to do whatever she could to stabilize the situation, stabilize the growth of infected people, stabilize the possible consequences of a disease that was not yet very known at this point. So she stated on the record that between the lines here, I don't know what to do, but we'll try to figure it out, we'll do our best. We will try some things out, we'll experiment and see what works and what doesn't work. We will make fails, we will make mistakes, we will encounter failures in what we're doing right now, which is very uncommon in public sector and particularly in policy. But that is what we need to do when we hit these complex and chaotic problems. We need to test, we need to experiment to figure out what is the best thing to do right now, instead of trying to adapt solutions that work for other things, because they will not work here. So, as a result, I mean, old models that might seem really good at solving complicated or simple problems doesn't really work anymore when we're looking at the complex issues. So they are changing the models of public sector, how public sector work. This is a very simplified illustration of a process in public sector regulations or policy making. That the public sector builds regulations, so it's a financing proposals, and then make it law, bring it out to citizens and businesses, and then see what happens. This is really a good process if we're working with simple or complicated problems, because we have experts here. We have experts in this field. They're not the best in one. They know where to look if they don't know have the answer. So they are really good at figuring out and do the analysis to understand complicated and simple problems. But if it's complex problems, there's no we've done it before. So we need to include these in what we're doing. We need to test with these. We need these people, the citizens. We need to figure out so what is right for them. So new models are emerging, and some models look very much like this. where we put the value that we're trying to solve in the middle of things. What value are we trying to bring to the people, to the citizens, in the center of stuff? And then public sector, citizens, businesses, these are stakeholders. Civil society coming in as well. Stakeholders are working together, sharing perspectives, trying to figure out what can we do to create the value we want. Creating more beds in a hospital or creating better care for elderly people might not just relate on public sector. It might be that we need to involve civil society, volunteer workers to create the value we want on our elderly people. Maybe private companies can also contribute to making it the best value possible, and so on. So let's move on to chapter 2 here, the mindset of design thinkers. So traditional people think of designers as people who do these things: furniture, chairs, objects. And it's not completely untrue. Of course it's not untrue. I'm a trained product designer, so I actually studied doing these kind of things. But designing of chairs, designing of furniture, objects are as much a handcraft and a profession in itself. What is interesting is that design always has a deeper purpose of why you are designing. So this is actually a really famous chair, Danish modernist from the 50s, 60s. A chair that has been sold in supermarkets. Yeah, believe it or not. It was a designer chair produced in order to sell it cheaply and affordably to Danish people after the war, to have really good quality furniture. So even though it's a beautiful chair, well shaped, really nice aesthetics, it's also a design for democracy through furniture design. So the intention of designing this chair to begin with was make high quality, affordable chairs for people to buy, so that we can have long-lasting furniture in people's home, in everybody's home, not just rich people. And the tool that was used for designing this democratic sort of movement in furniture was furniture design. So this is a skill people have, but they're using that skill to do democracy. And what we're focusing on at the Danish Design Center, and the way we think and design thinking in general has focused on, is design as an enabler. So it's a method or process or an approach or a mindset that goes across professions. It's a way of dealing with change. To, for example, for making things more democratic, you can use furniture design, poster design, you can use fashion design, maybe even, because design is still existing as an industry. So you have furniture design, fashion designers, product designers, strategy designers, people who have handcraft for something they can create. So usually, designer like me is facilitating or enabling others to use design as a method for change. So some of the general skills of a designer, there's obviously quite a lot, but these are some of them that are adapted in the design thinking way of working. So obviously designers are very investigative, they're exploring, they're very much focused on go out and ask questions with a curious mind, trying to understand the world they're living in. They really, really fast go and make things concrete so that they can communicate what this is about. Some people think it's about simplifying. It's not really about simplifying, it's about communicating. So you see quite a lot of visuals quite fast when working design driven, because visuals can give another language to understanding complex context situations or issues. Then designers work iterative, trial and error, also adapting a prototyping mindset, so trying to catch the whole in shorter iterative processes, like we talked about with the incremental decision making. So trying things out, learning from that, trying it out again, learning from that, trying it out again, and trying to build the wholeness of the solution already from the beginning, and then building on top of that. And then maybe final and last, design processes always have humans in the center of what they're doing. Some people even say maybe life-centered, so the good life, always asking the question from the perspective of the user, or the human being and the citizens or the environment for that matter. So a skill set is empathy, the ability to, and the curiosity to try to understand someone who is radically different from you or similar to you for that matter. Usually you will see a design process illustrated like this. Believe me, I've been to an art school taking an art degree in design, and my process has been like this as well. And it has to be like this because this is an explorative process. But as you see, Elizabeth Sanders is pointing out, there are different phases of a process like this. There are different outcomes, and the process becomes more and more sort of framed and closed and convergent in the end. All the things that happens here is actually just two things. And that is about the mindset of a designer. A designer has two different perspectives or approaches of working. And they're these two. The divergent attitude and the convergent attitude. When you're in the divergent attitude, you're curious about the world, you're open, you're saying yes to things, you're explorative, you're asking questions, you're curious. You're not saying no, you're not taking any decisions, you're not being critical, you're not being analytic, trying to just go with the flow of what is interesting. Hence the here. On the other side, the convergent is actually exactly the opposite. That's the ability or the attitude to take decisions, like close down on yourself, do not explore anymore, but see what you have and then take a decision from that. These two approaches, and this is very analytic compared to this one, which is really explorative, are two opposite directed ways of dealing with the world, being in the world. And as a good designer in a good design process, do these two things equally good. So when you're thinking about creative types, usually think about these, just doing that. But real professional design thinkers are as good at taking decisions as they are at exploring and creating opportunities. That also means that when working in teams, you will obviously have people that feel more comfortable here, and some people feeling more comfortable here, and you need to put them together in a good way to be explicit about that you need to be able to do both and be very explicit about now we're actually creating opportunities. So we have to be in this mindset of not being analytic, but more explorative. And now we're taking decisions and going on. The British Design Council made this design process model some years ago that some of you might know called the double diamond, and it's built on these principles of opening up and closing down, putting two of these diamonds, as they call them, after each other, and defining four phases that are in every design process. There are a lot of illustrations of design process, but the most important thing is that this opening up and closing down is the iterative process of doing it over and over again. So a complete design process might have 10 of these opening and closing. You need to plan that when you're designing your design process and what kind of phases you move into. That was chapter number 2. We move on to chapter number 3. And that is exactly the concrete approach and some of the methods that you can use in designing your own process, a design thinking process. So you could say that design comes in 3 dimensions. This is our model from the Danish Design Center that we use, and I will introduce that one to you. This 3 dimension doesn't have a direction. That means that you don't need to take one or the other to begin with. So it's not a linear model of a design process, because different problems, different issues, demands you starting in different places. But I will, though, in this particular example, start with exploring the problem space, then move to co-creating new solutions, and then make the future concrete as the last one. Okay. So, understanding the problem, exploring the problem space. It's very much about the divergent mode. So it's about designing processes that actually move you, that lets you use your empathy to understand the world. So you have the challenge, problem, that's a pretty sort of concrete thing, it's probably a statement, something, and then you go out and explore different perspectives on what's this problem about, what is this challenge about, Go out and talk to people usually. Uncover those perspectives that you don't have yourself or your organization or in your organization. Then you know a lot about the problem. Probably have a lot of things, also contradicting things inside. Might have talked to 10 people, 5 of them are on this side and 5 on this side, and you know how they feel about it, what is valuable. And you need to transform it into something that you can use for actually solving and coming up with solutions. And that's a conversion exercise. Because you have all this material here, and you need to convert it into what we call design space. So here you look at all the stuff you collected, and then you just start taking decisions in your team. So what is interesting, what is not interesting, what is important, what is not important. And at this point, if it's early on in the process, it might not be that important that you're right. Important is that you move on and you make some decisions here, so that you go into the next phase of exploring solutions. A design space is not a problem, because a design space is what drives you to look at opportunities rather than problems to solve. So in this process, you're turning your problem into a space of opportunities. You probably explore places where you could put value instead of band-aiding problems. That's a really important step, because it's easier to be creative, it's easier to come up with solutions that hit the mark, especially when we're talking complex issues, when you're looking at opportunities to create value instead of solving problems. This is a situation of an interview with my colleague Monica, out testing the use of technical devices with elderly people. She actually visited this old lady in her house, see if she has a microphone, asking her questions, but trying very much to go in and understanding her context, understanding her situation, small talking with her to have her understand. And what we actually figured out in this project was that elderly people most have phones, at least most places, and when the public sector sends out letters, they usually use emails, if they are digital at least, or another platform. And what we figured out is that elderly people are really good at social media. They're not very good at emails, because they never used email, but they use social media to keep in contact with their grandchildren. So an insight from this research here, from this exploring the problem, was that maybe so many platforms are better ways of getting in contact with elderly people than email, for example. Completely something that I at least wouldn't have thought of without talking to them, to the user itself. Then we move into phase bubble dimension number 2, is co-creating new solutions. And it's important that we are coming up with ideas that could create value for the target group at hand. In the example of the old lady. We have our design space. Then we're opening up in a traditional ideation phase where you are exploring what could be a solution for this design space. What solution could we put into this space? Not saying no analysis is the point, just coming up with ideas. You know the brainstorm thing, this is what happens here. Let's see, that's just a small part of the design thinking process. Then the convert part of this phase happens. This is where you decide which ideas are good. You might assess the ideas, you might combine some of the ideas to make a solid and the best choice, and then you pick out the best ideas to move on with. That is a very sort of decision-making space in Metaspace. So also in co-creating new solution, that dimension has an opening up and closing down phase. When you decided on an idea, the best idea, you usually do a concept around it, a recipe for how the solution looks like. And that's what takes you on to the last dimension. The thing is that you might think that ideas are best created in a room of a lot of people. That is not true. Actually, the best idea happens when you're alone. New research actually shows that. So those brainstorm sessions that you're probably taking part of a lot of times might not actually be that efficient as you might think. Because we get ideas when we're doing the shower, when we're taking the dog out, when we're doing the dishes, when we're cooking, whatever we're doing. When we're relaxing, the brain still works on creating those ideas. The thing is that if you bring the ideas to the table after you've been home for a day or two, all the ideas that you came up with during that time, you're actually in the group that you're working. When you combine those ideas, they become better. So I might say that the best idea arrives when you're by yourself, but the best ideas get really good ideas when you combine them with other people's ideas and perspectives. So it's really valuable to include your colleagues, the stakeholders, your citizens, and whoever else plays a role in your project when trying to assess and validate and come up with even better ideas than the one we have initially. Then we move to the last one, make the future concrete. Here is, in this phase, it's about communicating your idea to the world, not to sell it, not to present it as the final solution, but to get feedback. So it's a way of communicating with the world and seeing what they think about the idea that you come through. And we use prototyping for that. Prototypes are a physical object or artifact that helps you tell the story of the solutions you're suggesting. Tell the story of the future you're suggesting, in the future where that solution, your idea, is a reality. So from the concept description that you did on your idea, you explore what am I curious about to know, to learn about, and to get feedback on from my users, from my colleagues, whoever's in the target group. So here you explore hypotheses, curiosities, and doubts you have about the value of this project. You see here you're opening up and exploring again, leaving behind that you think it was the best idea. Now the aim is to figure out where might it fail. Very important. Where might this idea fail? Just looking to just get thumbs up from everyone. You're looking for where you can improve the idea. When you explore that, then you start building the prototype. Because you're building the prototype as a presentation of your solution in order to test what it is you want to get feedback on. So the prototype, you build that in order to build that or design that for the test situation, where you go out and ask people, exploring, is this the right problem? Is this the right solution? How can it be improved? So when you go out and test, it's not about selling, it's not about getting people on board and thinking it's a really good idea. It's actually about them pointing out your blind ankle, pointing out where you haven't seen their perspective on what might be important in relation to this idea. This is really important. So an example is a project we did several years ago in the context of a new children's hospital being built. So we're looking at what kind of things should be in the hospital for these kids. And as adults, obviously, we can think a lot of things that are important for kids in hospitals, but why not ask the kids themselves? So we actually went out and built a Lego representation of the hospital ground, and then we had the kids help us build the hospital of their dreams. These are sick kids. A very interesting insight, because now we're looking for also insights again, was that one of the kids, when he saw that they made this amazing play area in the hospital, he said, "Oh, but I can't go play there." And then the adults asked, "Why can't you go there? It looks fun." "Yeah, it looks really fun, but I can't go there. My mom says I can't go." And they said, "Why did your mom don't want you to go?" "It's because I'm sick. I mean, I cannot play with the toys that other kids play with because they'll make me sick." So he's a cancer kid who got chemo, and by that has no immune system, so he can't just go and play with other kids. So thinking about having a play area around where he's staying in the hospital might actually make him feel even worse. So maybe it's not that good an idea to put these play areas in plain sight for all kids, because some of them might not be allowed to go there, and that would be a deprivation of what they really want. That's an insight that you probably wouldn't get unless you actually talk to the kids. So this is my favorite illustration of what a prototype is. You see, what you want to convey to the user, people you're talking to, is the experience of the airplane. But you can use these two bricks to illustrate that. It doesn't need to look like an airplane. You use the prototype to get your informers into the play of how future could look like when this is real. Okay, fourth and last chapter. This is going to be a little fast because actually this is about the leadership of design thinking or design leadership. And my director, Christiana Onabola, wrote this article together with Robert Austin for the Harvard Business Review last year, 2 years ago, 2 years ago, where they lay out an idea of the practice of design leadership. So I think you should go and read it, but I have some quotes from it that I want to pick up and go into depth about a little bit. So they say the challenge of leading design is design thinking is challenging because it involves something more than just managing change. It involves discovering what kind of change is needed. So what they're saying here is that design leadership is not just about project managing change, problem solving. It's actually about helping your staff, helping the people around you, go and discover what is actually the change that we're looking for. What is needed? What are the needs here? So go a step further and ask, is this the right problem we are trying to solve here? And as we have the design in 3 dimensions, you might also say that to each of these 3 dimensions there are sort of 3 principles of how you can lead your staff, your people, your colleagues to be better at dealing with each of these design dimensions. So to explore the problem is how can you help leverage empathy with your people? Co-creating new solutions is how can you help them navigate ambiguity of things going, not knowing where we're going. And for making the future concrete is like how can you help them be better at rehearsing the future, like with the airplane I showed you in the Lego brick. So if we take them one by one, leveraging empathy, how can you help your people leverage empathy? Is to employees long accustomed to being told to be rational and objective, design methods can seem rather subjective and personal. Might also agree on that. Businesses want to understand their customers, of course, but design thinking approaches to connecting with customers can feel too close, uncomfortable, emotive, sometimes overwhelmingly affecting. Sorry. Obviously, this article has been written for the Harvard Business Review, so if you just you should think of when talking about customers, it's obviously citizens in this context. So the thing here is that when going out and exploring perspectives from other people, using the empathy to understand other people, there's no like factual thing to get from it. You will get the messiness of human nature, emotional wise, but also what is important here. And that might seem to some people not serious enough, subjective and personal. But if we are to hit the most people, we also need to hit that one person that is affected by this issue. An example of someone who uses to a very high degree is the head nurse of our national hospital in Denmark. She had a problem with a department in the hospital where patients were feeling neglected. And she tried several times to go to the board and tell them about this department, and they always said, well, there's nothing to do about it because it's we don't have money and all these things. Then what she did was she went down and interviewed the people. That was actually the patients that were in this yard, and recorded the sound clips of them and brought it to the board. And when the board suddenly heard the voices of real people, these are real people that we are hearing, they completely changed their mind. Because they could see there's actually people behind the quotes, behind the numbers. And And these people, these quotes from, or these samplets from people really disturb them in their way of rational thinking. Because driving a hospital, running a public sector institution with complex issues, with human-related issues, you can always just think of them as spreadsheets and numbers. So she's saying here, what I wanted was to disturb them, and she surely did. She actually managed to get a mandate to do something about it. So, if when doing sign leadership and you want to leverage empathy, you want to work with more empathetic data, there's some things you can do. You can endorse processes which involve information about customers and users. So actually ask people to bring what they know about the people, the customers or the users, in this case of the citizens. Endorse that the processes are important. Processes where they go out and talk with people are important. Support employees who are dealing with distressing emotion that arise when the effectiveness of the process is questioned. It's a little hard, but you might have colleagues or staff that feels like this is going sideways in many ways, that you're not really moving forward because you're talking about the emotion of people and how they deal with stuff. And so you need to take care of those people and tell them, hey, there's actually a point to spending time in this phase of actually understanding what it is we're trying to do. Then push employees to open up. That's maybe the hardest thing to do, is to have people that are used to converging all the time, help them diverge on and use the curiosity and be okay with finding out there are things they don't know, because we are usually working with high-skilled experts in public sector, and for experts alike, it's hard to admit that there's something you don't know. Framing new findings as opportunities for redesign. So, help to see that new insights are not the enemy. New insights is actually something that can improve on what we are doing. It's not something that is just there to disturb you. It's there to inform you and make you better at your job. Moving into number 2, in encouraging divergence and navigating ambiguity. That's number 2 that relates to the co-creating new solutions. So, design methods ask employees not to race to the finish line, not to converge on an answer as quickly as possible, and instead to widen the set of options to go sideways for a while rather than forward. This can be difficult for people schooled in the need for efficiency, the importance of cost savings, the value of being lean, and so on. It can feel like spinning wheels because it kind of is. Having people stay a lot in the open phase, the open attitude, the divergent attitude, and not taking decision might be uncomfortable. And it's important to give them the framework and understanding that this will end at some point. The divergent attitude will end, and we will get to a place where we start taking decisions. This is not a never-ending story of just dwelling into stuff. It's important that you, as a leader or manager, make this clear and help those people that feels like the process is stolen. Yeah. And we have a manager of a care institution here saying it's like searching in the dark, because sometimes you don't really know what you're looking for when you're exploring the problem, when you're looking for new solutions, and then suddenly it's just there. But you need to have some patience to wait for it to happen. So, what you should do when encouraging diversion and navigating ambiguity and iterations, the one like going out and trying things again and again, is to help their staff resist the urge to converge. That's self-explanatory. Support the goal-oriented people to deal with their insecurities. A lot of people are taught to be goal-oriented, so asking them to spin around, go explore things even more, and go back in time, go back and do something again that they already did, might feel like they're losing their goals, that they're losing track of where they're going. You really need to take care of these people because they will sabotage the process if they are not dealt with, and set goals for them on the way so that they feel like they still are hitting some marks and milestones. Then obviously lead by example. And in the case of actually sharing how you feel, when you feel uncertain about where we're going, that helps morale. But you should always don't show hopelessness. But say like, I'm uncertain where we're going. That's what we're figuring out right now. So let's be in the space together, and then we'll get there together. I'm sure that we will definitely get to where we need to go. As said, yeah, it's not a lack of direction. You as a leader have to, trust the process. The third one, rehearsing new features. If that were not enough, design approaches also call on employees to experience something that they have historically tried to avoid, failure. The aspects of these methods that involve iterative prototyping and testing work best when they produce lots of negative results, outcomes that show you what does not work. But piling up seemingly unsuccessful outcomes does not feel good to most people. You can probably relate to this, that we are obviously trying to avoid failures, but if we are to uncover those perspectives, those blind angles that we are not familiar with, we need to ask what is not working here, what is wrong. And this is hard for most people. That's what I also, when talked about prototyping and testing, the idea of actually putting something out in the world that you worked on and tell people to take it apart, tell you where it doesn't work for them, so where they feel it's a stupid idea, and so on, feels really, really uncomfortable. So what you need to do here is obviously trying to get people less detached to their work and see it as a task in itself to figure out what is not working here. Because you need to do a lot of fails to get to something that you have never tried before, a success you've never seen or heard about before when dealing with complex issues. And as a deputy dean working on a community college here says, like, he's been trying this out with all of his teachers and letting them go out and try a new curriculum instead of thinking it all through to begin with. He says it's a loss of control, but it's a really positive loss of control. And it is for all. Trying to be successful all the time doesn't make us happy people. So if we can let go of it and pursue the real successes of life by trying out what doesn't work for you, what is not working for us, we will get to a much bigger success. And that's the same way design processes work. So losing a bit of control to gain a lot of positive results is the idea here. So as a leader, when you want to rehearse new features with your people, your colleagues, and learn how to fail forward, to actually go into the space where you know that you will fail, to get wiser, to get more knowledge. You can enable testing and trial and error practice with user staff as a perimeter. So actually put time and resources into having people go out and test their assumptions, test their hypotheses, test their prototypes on what they're working on. Put that into your budget. Because it seems like something you do after you actually did the thing, but it should be in the middle where you're iterative, still have time in the budget to work on it. Address skepticism about the value of the work. To talk about what I just talked about, like making sure that this is part of the process, this is what we want from it. Be specific about what overall outcomes need to be achieved. So always have the end goal at hand, saying that we're not building a new piece of legislation. Yeah? We're trying to create this value. Legislation, the part of legislation is just a chair to get there. Remember from the beginning, like we're designing value through legislation, for example. Yeah. Have a focus on creating value, not just for external clients, but also for employees, which will broaden the potential benefits of change and secure buying. So this is when you are working with with solutions, then try to involve the value for your people in it as well. How do they get wiser? Do they get more capabilities? Do they get insights into a field that they are not familiar with to begin with? Try to uncover that, because that motivates people to also deal with some of the unpleasantness of this process that is probably unusual to them. Okay, that was all for me, and thank you for watching the video, and please visit our website, send me an email, connect with me on Twitter if you like, and thank you for listening in.
Thank you very much to the DDC team for this insightful presentation. I'd like now to turn to our panelists and introduce you to them. So we have three panelists today who are alt students. The first one is Mr. Sylvester Kaunga, who is a research officer at the National Assembly of Zambia. His work involves providing policy research and analysis to members of parliament to enable them to make evidence-based decisions as they carry out their legislative oversight, budgetary, and representative roles. He holds a Bachelor of Art degree in Geography and History from University of Zambia, and he holds a Master of Art degree in Environmental Policy from the Memorial University of Newfoundland, Canada. Christiana Onabola was born and raised in Lagos, Nigeria. She has a bachelor degree from the University of Lagos and came to Canada in 2016 as a recipient of the African Leader of Tomorrow Scholarship. She has a Master in Public Policy and Global Affairs from the University of British Columbia. She's currently a Vanier Scholar and a PhD candidate in interdisciplinary health sciences at the University of Northern British Columbia. And we have Elmond Bandoko, who is currently a PhD student at SSRHC, Vanier Scholar in the Department of Geography and Environment at the University of Western Ontario. Elmond is also a graduate fellow with the Center for Urban Policy and Local Governance at the University of Western Ontario. His doctoral research focuses on urban governance and the spatial politics of traders in Harare, Zimbabwe. He holds a Master of Public Administration, Local Government from the University of Western Ontario, where he studied as an African Leader of Tomorrow Scholar, and a Bachelor of Science in Rural and Urban Planning of from the University of Zimbabwe. So welcome to the three of you. We're glad to have you here for this discussion. And it was a really great and very insightful video. So we'd like to have your opinion and comments on the video. I'd like to start with Christiana. What in particular interests you really about design thinking?
Yeah, thank you, Diane. I find the design thinking particularly innovative for tackling any sustainability challenge and for building capacities for solutions, no matter how convoluted or intertwined the challenge is. What is even more interesting is that it is far from being an individualistic or unitary exercise. The design space is an integrated, co-creating space that asks you to set aside your assumptions and brainstorms lots of different ways to approach and solve a problem with others who are potentially affected or playing a role in the challenge. And it does not make room for hierarchies, which makes it more interesting. It seeks to fully engage everyone. So in its ideating process, there are no bad ideas also. It accommodates diverse points of view because it seeks to understand the problem from different perspectives and uncover needs. And in the context of uncovering needs, there is a value creation mission at the core of design thinking. And to do the thinking process uses empathy as a positive tool. So the design actors and thinkers are open to empathizing with others in order to understand where they're coming from. And instead of each party thinking about what it wants in a certain situation. They are open to engaging with others to ask, to probe for what the needs might be. And this brings me back to the value-driven mission in design thinking. It is not central to solving problems, but really addressing needs and decentralizing decision thinking to ensure that solutions are user-centric. So in summary, design thinking is a relevant tool in the public policy sector for addressing intertwined and complex policy challenges affecting our people, particularly for deciphering what problems need to be solved, for whom are problems being addressed, and solutions for whom. And this often offers an avenue to test and improve ideas quickly before each resources are applied to rolling out government services or interventions. I'll rest there. Thank you.
Thank you, Christiana. Elman, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Diana, for that. I'd like to pick from what Christiana left from. I think for me, design thinking is, I see it as you're departing from the business as usual approach of making policies or addressing public problems, right? You are acknowledging the complexity, the interconnectedness of different policy challenges that the public sector is facing. And you're taking a step back to say, how do we do things differently? And one of the things that inspire me about design thinking is this idea of it being a human-centered approach, where you give a voice to end users in terms of giving them an opportunity to shape policy decisions, to contribute in terms of framing the issues, to contribute in terms of coming up with the potential solutions to those challenges. And once you do that, you will be able to, there's an aspect of professional empathy, there's an aspect of co-creation, like what Christiana has said. And then that diversity of opinions and ideas in terms of how to deal with public problems is particularly inspiring, because it gives you an opportunity to unlock new and innovative solutions to contemporary challenges. And I like this idea of prototyping and testing ideas, like what Christiana has said. It gives you an idea of what can potentially work in a different context when you do prototyping and testing before you actually roll out or go to full implementation. So those are my additions from what Christiana has said about how design thinking is an interesting model to address policy challenges.
Thank you. And Sylvester.
Well, thank you so much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
I hope you can hear me. Sorry about that.
That's fine.
So for me, okay, sorry about that.
Sorry, we have a little glitch here. We can come back to Sylvester in a few seconds.
Hey, I am back here.
Okay.
Okay, so for me, sorry, there was a bit of noise in the background. I didn't want to have everybody get disturbed. So just to concur with my colleagues, I think design thinking is very interesting. And for me, what stands out are two things. Empathy, the idea of empathizing with the people, feeling with the people. That is very unique for me in terms of designing programs or services for the people, or public services for the people, because it speaks to how we can deviate from the business as usual, as Elmon put it, to a place where we're asking people not just what they want, but what they can do as well, to be able to create something that not only works for them, but in which they are also actively involved. So for me, the aspect of empathy in design thinking stands out, as well as prototyping, where you don't just come up with this idea or this a program or concept, but you try it with the people. You say, can this work for you? Is this something that is workable in this community, given the diversities, given the realities on the ground? So I think two things stand out for me, and that's what I find interesting about design thinking. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your interest. So Sylvester, I'd like to come back to you again to ask you, how after watching this video, how might you use this like in your place of work or in your career? How can this apply?
Thank you. This can apply in many ways with regard to maybe my career, because this design thinking concept, though it applies mostly in the area of public policy making, you can apply it in many situations, including being able to design a service for a people. So I find design thinking applicable to my work and my career, in the sense that what we do involves people. We help policymakers to make informed decisions, which decisions go to affect the people. So before we get to that point where a decision is finally adopted, we need to involve the people. And that's where I see design thinking being applicable in my situation or in my career. So having to ask the questions, what do people really need? What can they do about this situation? For me, that is very applicable. When you're coming up with a law, for example, you need to ask a lot of questions about the implications of that particular law or legislation on society, to what extent different groups of people will be affected, and so on and so forth. So to be able to do that, or to be able to make that law, to ensure that that law is effective, you need to involve the people. So involving the people, empathizing with them, co-creating this law or legislation with them will go a long way in making that particular service or public service program not only sustainable, but also it will create ownership on the part of the people or the communities. So that's how I would apply this in my situation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Christiana, how would you apply this to your work or your career?
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I am into public health research and practice, and we all know that public health challenges these days are actually transcending the habits of medical or just biological interventions. They are becoming increasingly, driven by human activities and climate-related events. So bringing design thinking to bear on emerging public health challenges is really key. By embarking on some engaged form of research, and which actually involves bringing diverse stakeholders, actors, the public, policymaker, into the research space. And since research is knowledge creation, so it's really important to really able to explore the different views of different stakeholders and the people affected, or the people who are actually implicated in the challenge that the research is trying to address.
Thank you, Christiana. And Elman, how would you use this in your career?
Yeah, thank you, Diana, for that question. Coming from urban planning, urban development, I want to give you an example of where this can be potentially applied. One area is, in the cities, particularly in developing countries, there's what is called, slums, so informal settlements where people live without proper infrastructure and services. So one area where this can be applied is participatory slum upgrading in terms of improving livelihoods, improving housing and urban services in these disadvantaged communities. I want to give you an example. In 2016, for instance, where design thinking was actually applied in the city of Cape Town, South Africa, to kind of bring, people who live in these settlements, and you bring together the municipal officers and community-based organizations in terms of co-creating solutions, in terms of in this way you're actually seeing the people who live in these settlements as designers, and they because their experiences are particularly very important in terms of how are you going to deal with housing issues, how are you going to deal with infrastructure challenges, how are you going to deal with issues of financing for housing improvements and so forth. So the complexity of that challenge actually bring people together. It was called a better living challenge, where they actually went through the whole design thinking process, actually piloting some of the intervention in terms of what models can we use to do slum upgrading in a different way that can transform people's lives, those that are living in disadvantaged communities. So that is potentially an area where design thinking can be applied in many different ways, in terms of improving people's lives based on their needs and co-creating solutions in terms of improving infrastructure and so on. So that is one area where it could be applied in my context.
Thank you very much. That's really that's really interesting. So I'd like to know, Elman, do you have an example or a project of how this might be used?
Oh yeah, like what I was just giving to you, this example where the city of Cape Town actually designed what is called a better living challenge in 2016. And this process followed a design thinking process in the way that, they begin with a question to say, how do we improve housing and infrastructure conditions for more than 800,000 people that are living in informal settlements or disadvantaged communities in this city? And then they brought together, the end users, like the people who live in the settlements. They brought together civil society, community-based organizations that work on different interventions in these communities, bringing together municipal officials and many different stakeholders in terms of what can be done differently. And in this way, we are putting the end users, like people who live in these settlements, as designers, and they are co-creating and co-producing solutions in terms of what are their priorities, what do they, based on their experiences, what do they see as potential, potentially good, interventions in their particular context. So it was really a very successful process. It was implemented over a 2-year period, in terms of doing slum upgrading in a different way and putting design thinking at the center of it, to say, rather than using a top-down approach where planners and urban policymakers design solutions and go and implement without adequate co-design and consultation to actually include these issues of empathy and user-centeredness. So that is an example that I found very inspiring in terms of using these different concepts of design thinking.
Thank you so much. And Christiana, what example, or do you have a project that on which you might apply that to? Yeah.
Oh yeah, thanks, Diane. So I'm currently a part of a Nigerian working group, which is under the umbrella of the Nigerian Coalition for Ecosocial Health Research, NCHR. So her goal is to undertake research and projects that address the health impacts of climate change in Nigeria. And climate change is a classic example of a wicked problem, actually, that engenders diverse sustainability challenges. So in our project, I envision that design thinking can be relevant for instance, working at the local government level, for working with communities affected by climate change. And take for instance, flooding. Flooding is a climate challenge. It's a common occurrence in Nigeria that has serious ecosocial and health impacts. And So to really work with communities in addressing flooding challenges, we need to bring into the design space not just the local government stakeholders, but even the community people, representatives of the communities who are affected, then the civil society organization working in the space, and all other interested parties, and of course, looking at the problem, tackling the problem from different and diverse point of view, in order to really get into the root of the flooding challenges and how to address them.
Thank you. Sylvester.
Thank you, Diane. For me, I think the examples my colleagues have given suffice. I can just give you a little example from Zambia, where we tried to understand, because design thinking, as has been indicated, tries to understand with the people. As you are designing policy, public policy, as you are designing any public policy program or service that is aimed at addressing the needs of the people, you need to engage the people. You need to understand what they feel, how they live, what they do, and so on and so forth. So in the Zambian parliament, for example, there's been this idea of having a youth or children's parliament. Okay, the idea is to be able to see how young people, it's got, I think, the two-pronged approach, or the objectives are two-pronged, if you like, to be able to encourage young people to come to the decision-making table, because many a time young people are left out because people look down on young people, like they can't make decisions and so on. Yet they have issues that affect them, and they can articulate those issues to the powers that be, to their leaders. So the idea was conceived that let's have a youth or a children's parliament, where we can have the same setting as the actual house or parliament, but then the issues that the young people are going to raise should be documented, and resolutions coming from there should be taken on board, so that the programs that are designed from that, from that time onwards, or from now onwards, include some of the issues that young people have raised, because they're unique, they're a unique group. So that's an example I can give you. And so we've been piloting that, and I think it's working well in trying to get the young people's views in the decision-making process.
Oh, that's a very great initiative. I think it's nice to get the youth involved when we're planning and innovating, like a lot of things like that. It's really nice. When some of the best ideas are co-created with the citizens, right, and other actors. How can this be facilitated in Africa, and how can African stakeholders co-create solutions for value creation? Christiana, would you like to go first?
Oh yeah, I can take that. So at the core of potentially creating a co-creating space is actually the how of navigating divergent views. And this is because the primary enemy of co-creation is a traditional way of coordinating for decision-making, is navigating divergent views. So in the leadership space for design thinking, the opportunities for divergent views should be embraced, should be created and allowed. And it is not about some departments managing change or leveraging their project management skill sets or thereabout, but it's really about exploring ideas, with the people that we use the solutions, and discovering what exactly are the change that these people need, the changes that the people need to see.
Thank you. Sylvester.
That's a loaded question, Diane, but thank you. And I'll just give a few perspectives. So I feel this can be applied or can be facilitated in Africa in many ways, but I'll just cite two. So it is said that over 50% or 60% of the population, or Africa's population, is made up of young people or the youth. So I feel as we follow up on, or as we apply this concept of design thinking, we really need to tap into the space of young people. We need to find them where they are. We need to understand what issues are affecting them, because then, I mean, they form the cohort of the future that we want. So we must ask them, what do you want? What future, what Africa do you want? Mm-hmm. So I feel programs, public policy programs must center on the youth, because really that's where things are happening, and the majority of the people are there, who are the young people. And we need also to tap into social media, in my view. That's how we can facilitate this design thinking and ensure that we tap into what young people are thinking, what young people are saying. And in doing so, I think our leaders must address the barriers that are there in terms of communication. I think we need to improve issues of internet connectivity for young people to be able to access these media, different types of media, and also to have their voice heard in the decision-making process. After all, that's what design thinking is all about, to be able to get different voices onto a table and being able to co-create, so that whatever you're going to design is something that will work for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your answer. I think that's really great. Elmond, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, thank you. I think I'll reiterate my previous submissions in that I see this design thinking being, in the context of Africa, particularly the way we plan and manage and govern our cities. It is an area which has great potential for design thinking applications in most African cities, because and the biggest challenge that planners and policymakers, particularly in cities, has to deal with is this, the traditional way, sometimes where planners and policymakers, they just come up with plans and policies. And then when they go to the communities, it's just a matter of trying to validate so that, their interventions or their proposals will be accepted when they're implemented. But I think, in terms of understanding how people survive on a daily basis and their needs when it comes to, their livelihoods, infrastructure, urban services, and so forth. It is an area that has been, really doing, I've given you an example of Cape Town in South Africa, and a lot more could be done in other contexts, thinking about how do we improve our urban communities in a different way. So this is potentially another way, departing from the usual public consultation or public engagement that is usually done when plans and policies are being made. So I see that as, as one area where it can play a huge role in terms of doing things differently.
Thank you. Amazing. Really great discussion here. When we're, what are the avenues of getting African leaders and youth involved in design? I think you probably have answered it, like looking at the question, I know that you kind of answered this in your first thing, but I'd like to know, what are the avenues of getting African leaders and youth involved in design thinking to transform problems to opportunities?
Okay,
Can I go first?
Okay,
Sure,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, so for me, I will reiterate what I mentioned earlier, but also to go further and mention that right now we have a number of policy documents that are guiding our development trajectory as a continent, but also as a world. So we have the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think if you look at them critically, they put humans at the center. That's one avenue our leaders can use, and we can actually apply the concept of design thinking as we implement or as we move towards achieving the sustainable development goals. If you look at, for example, the goal that talks about, I think that speaks to universal health coverage, okay? That's something that is speaking to different groups of people in society. You need to listen to them, you need to hear them, you need to empathize with these people. So for you to be able to design that program or that public health, program or intervention, you need to be able to engage the people. I'll also speak to the issue of climate change. The people are at the center because they're the ones affected, especially in Africa. We are adversely hit by this phenomenon. It's affecting the people because their adaptive capacity is highly diminished because of the socioeconomic base is very low in Africa, but the people are involved. So I feel one avenue that our leaders can use are these policy documents. We also have the Agenda 2063. I think that's one agenda that speaks to the Africa we want. Yeah. We can engage people and applying design thinking. I think we can achieve a lot. This is one avenue that our leaders can use. But also to just reiterate, like I said, what I mentioned, we need to look at the young people, how we can involve the young people, because the majority of Africa's population is made up of young people. We need to find them. We need to hear their voices. Their voices must be heard in the public policy process, making process space. We need to harness the social media, where they are found. And leaders must address the barriers or the challenges that are there. They must ensure that, they open up, in the media for people to speak freely. Because if you clamp on the media, or if you clamp on if you shrink the space, people will not be able to speak, and then you won't hear what they want or what they can do about the situation. So it's about doing things differently, like Elmond mentioned, but then I think we can look at those areas. In my view, those avenues can help. Thank you.
Okay, and how would you, what would you say are the co-creating and transformational potentials that you see there?
Well, let me throw that challenge to Elmond, my brother.
Okay.
To just sort of add on. I think what I've said for me
the ball's in your
suffices.
court, Elmond.
Yeah.
In terms of the co-creation and transformational potentials.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the first thing is we have a population, like what Sylvester said, in terms of our young people, and they're vibrant, in terms of even people that are willing to. But the biggest challenge we have to tackle is, the issue of even at leadership level, capacity building, because I feel like this design thinking methodology has not been well populated in the African context, and I'm not sure whether most of our leaders understand what it is, even those, not just political leaders, but even those that work as technocrats in different, in the public sector at different levels. So it could be a starting point, maybe through APAM and other organizations, in terms of what kind of capacity building can be done, so that people understand the value of using this approach. Because if that is not like if you take and give somebody a written explanation of what design thinking, they may not understand it. So I think that aspect of capacity building, popularizing the concept, and demonstrating where it has been applied, and looking at the context and opportunities in Africa in many different facets can actually help. Like, I think, before we even start thinking about where we can apply it, do people understand what it is? That's my first point. So.
Christiana, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I appreciate all the points of view that have been shared, and just as a way of integrating and, concretizing everything said, I will talk about the need for creating a social innovation hub, for instance. Well, I envision that such social innovation hub could be designed or created in such a way that is intergenerational, is integrated, it brings together youths, the leaders, stakeholders, people of different gender, just bring them into that space and where they can actually interact with youth. It could be via a hearing platform, or it could be a town meeting, so to say. I mean, thereabout. It could even be visually designed, maybe if there are safety concerns. I know that that's actually, a point of concern in Africa in some settings. So it could be visually designed just to be able to hear people out, then bring, or if it's something that can be done in real time, it's fine. But then I think a social innovation all by there is something that African leaders can potentially look into and just get into that co-creating space with youth. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. We know that African problems are intertwined, and divergent views have created so many problems, more problems than solutions, so you could say. So how do you believe, like we as Africans, right, like African leaders of tomorrow, how can design thinking, thinking innovation in Africa be integrated, like, in space and facilitate convergence in decision-making and user-centeredness? Element, would you like to go first?
Yeah, for sure. I think I want to emphasize two things. The first one is each context is unique.
Yes.
And has got its own challenges and its own opportunities. That is the starting point. So we need to think about what are the key levers for design thinking to work in Africa. Because sometimes in the status quo, it could be a difficult issue in the way public sector is structured, in terms of the culture, in terms of usually department and agencies want to work in silos, which is one thing that design thinking is against. Because we are talking about, we need to be open, and we need to bring, we need to break those silos and begin to think, in terms of how do we bring stakeholders together. So the starting point, basically is about the context, understanding how the public sector is structured and what can be done differently. So once that is addressed, then we begin to think about how do we address the relationship between civil society and government? Because in some context, there's always that tension between government and civil society, because we're also talking about, we need to bring civil society on the table, and if those issues in terms of relationships are not addressed, that could also create a challenge. So and then the list goes on in terms of in terms of the ordinary people, the people that actually consume those services, that actually bear the impact of those policies, how we bring them together. So I think it's, we need to start thinking about how do we reform our institutions in a way that can adopt innovation in terms of designing policies and addressing problems. So I think that's my starting point before we think about anything else in terms of, can it work in Africa or so forth. We need to ask those fundamental questions about the structure and systems of governance and policy in Africa that can potentially work as a barrier to design thinking adoption.
Christiana.
Yeah, so as African leaders, I would say we need to embrace a prototyping mindset. And that means we are willing to deploy design thinking and as an enabler of change. We need to be willing to undertake all the formalities and processes packed in design thinking as innovative ways for us to actually tackle wicked problems in a sustainable way. And it's not, and I think it's important that we do not just rely on some adaptive forms of managing problems or solving problems empirically. Why? I think we probably are used to that in Africa, but I think going by design thinking, we need to it's not just about gathering evidence based on previous ways of solving problems that we know we've known or we are used to, but it's really about, placing demand on ideas, on people's the diversity of solutions that are out there, potential solutions out there, and actually seeing how we can actually get people together in the co-creating space, get feedback from potential users of the solutions that we are designing. And even where ideas might fail, I mean, design thinking is not saying we cannot fail, but then we should be willing to embrace failure, and go back to the design table. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Sylvester, would you like to add something?
Yes, I would like to add something. That's an interesting question, and I concur with my colleagues have said. I would like to add that I think the challenges that Africa faces in terms of the solutions that we need, they are right in Africa. I think Africa should create its own solutions for the problems that it is facing. So in doing so, I feel like Christiana said, we need to embrace inclusivity and diversity. And I say there is there's actually unity in diversity. So we need to embrace that. We need to be able to create synergies. I think Elmond talked about redefining, for example, the relationship between government and civil society, okay? Because in my workspace, for example, we deal with a lot of, like I mentioned, we deal with legislation, for example, lawmaking, but that's something that's a public policy tool or a tool of governance that affects a lot of people. There's a tendency by ourselves or by institutions to consult those people that we think will give us expert submissions. You know, when you call for submissions, you always target those organizations, maybe research institutions, universities, but we need to change that. So we need to redefine who a stakeholder is. A stakeholder is not just that person that has, for example, the expertise or the knowledge on the subject matter. But I think it boils down to also the people that are consuming that particular service, I think, as Elmond put it. So one way of ensuring that we co-create, there's co-creation in the way we come up with programs and services in Africa. We need to redefine certain things. We need to, he spoke to looking at how the public sector or public administration is practiced in Africa. We need to change that and look at it and say, are there certain things we can change in the way we, for example, engage the people? There's a policy shop. We need to move from there and go to the people. Why not embrace public hearings, for example, as one of the key components in designing a public policy programs or services? The last one I want to say is we need to be able to look at the challenges we are facing, not as barriers in themselves, but as opportunities that we can use to actually even apply this concept of design thinking and innovate. Because they say without a challenge, you cannot innovate. You know, you need challenges around you for you to be able to think of innovative ways of resolving them. So the wicked problems that Africa faces are good. We should look at them. We should consider them to be good, because then they create opportunities for us to innovate and apply such concepts as design thinking. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was a very great discussion. I hope everyone, got something out of this and was enlightened with all this. I'd like to turn to the audience. I see we have Abdel Karim here, who wanted to share some ideas about his experience in applying design thinking in areas of government, right? Serving the public. Abdel Karim, can you, I guess you can unmute yourself and share this with us? Hi.
How is everybody?
Good, good. How are you?
Good.
Thank you
Yeah,
very
yeah,
much
yeah,
for being here.
yeah, thank you. I'm originally from Egypt, and I work now as a senior consultant in Dubai, in
Nice.
with the many entities, the governmental entities. I enjoying working here because the environment and the governmental leaders are provoking ideas for innovative solutions and policy making and developing and public service also. So we apply design thinking, and when I saw the film, it was excellent one, and also Suzanne from Canada is talking about the role of design thinking in public service, and also all of you. I enjoyed what you are talking about and solutions for Africa from Africa. Okay, and this is a bright idea, and it will lead to a bright future. What I would like to highlight is, when you develop the design thinking, you can start with services. It is very clear and concise, and when you develop new services, for the public and in an innovative way, especially when you let the public participate in designing phase of the service, and this is very important. Because sometimes when we think we know everything about the needs and the challenges for other people who are using our service is not the right approach. So it's design thinking. It gives us the right approach to let people participate and co-create with us, and this is very important. And also, I attended this webinar to connect with you, in African continent, because we are in our area. We have many ideas and solutions and tested ones. So especially in the area of governments and the governance also of the strategies and the implementation and execution and evaluation and so on. So we would like also to connect with you in the future, so we can at least share our experience and not let it limited to us here in this area.
Thank you very much, Dr. Karim. So I will.
Welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. So I will send you contact in the chat, so you can contact us later. We still have I think we have time for two more comments before the end. Is anyone else would like to share their experience or how they would apply design thinking in their area? All right, so thank you. I believe we don't have any more comments. Thank you very much to Sylvester, Christiana, and Elmond for taking the time and doing this today. I'd like to also thank our partners at CBIE. I'd like to thank our partners at DDC and APAM for this opportunity. And I hope you enjoyed it, and see you at the next event. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye, thank you.